Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to be joined by our presenter today, Sarah Mitchell, who is our Director of Customer Success. Today, Sarah is going to be tackling the Alpha Launch module, which is included in Alpha Anywhere, letting you submit your applications without going through the Android store or Apple iOS store. We've done the work for you. There are often quite a few questions about this, so I hope you find this to be an informative session. But remember, you can always ask questions of us by typing those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. You can also reach us at guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com. Hey there, Sarah, how's it going?
It's going good. How's it going there?
Going great. I see you're already the presenter. I love the design today. As I said, it looks like in liquid or something.
Yeah. Get some color up on that screen, right?
Something abstract, something to remind you of Alpha Launch. Well,
right. You know, Alpha Launch, Alpha Software's products are beautiful, easy on the eyes. So why not our presentations too?
I like your thinking.
Anyway, thank you all for joining us today. I'm glad you can be here. Today we are talking about Alpha Launch. We are not doing an intro to Alpha Launch. We're expanding upon something we've already done. And that was a webinar we did a while ago, over a year ago. I'm putting the link for that webinar in the chat right now. We will also include that link on the YouTube description for this video when it's published. So if you're watching there, look in the description for that link. But we are talking about Alpha Launch. But before we do that, the webinar schedule coming up next week, searching and sorting. Week after that, building custom controls. This one will be done by Dion. He's going to build a custom control for an API. You got to come check it out. It's going to be amazing. The 29th, we're going to look at configuring UX controls, some of the basic stuff, text box, radio buttons, some of the common controls you might use in an app, and how you navigate the UI for working with those. And then on July 6th, we're going to do something different. We're actually going to put a poll up on the forum after getting a little bit of feedback from the people who are here today about what you want to see. And then the top 5 options that we see, we're going to put a poll up on the forum where you can go and vote for the one you want to see on the 6th. So with that, I would encourage everyone to open up the questions pane and type in something you want to learn more about, something you're interested in, mobile development, web development. So one of the new features we released in recent history, Alpha Cloud, Alpha Launch. Maybe you want to learn more about the IIS and Classic servers. Do you want to learn more about deployment, development, designing your apps, even something like a popular development trend that you've seen that you'd like to figure out how to get that into the app that you're building. So think about it. Definitely post that in the chat. It says chat on my end. Post it in the questions. And we'd love to see that. You don't have to do it right this second. You can think about it throughout the webinar. But I want to make sure that the content that we're covering is the kind of content you guys want to see. And so periodically we would want to just check in with you, find out what it is that you're interested in, so that we can make sure that we are addressing that. And as always, Alpha DevCon is coming up very soon. It is June. DevCon's in October. There are not that many months left beforehand, so should start seeing some more information coming out about what we're going to be presenting. But if you have not gotten your ticket yet, you can go to our website, www.alphasoftware.com/devcon2022, and get your ticket there. I recommend buying your ticket as soon as possible because the price is only going to go up the closer we get to the date of DevCon. So
that's right. We're still doing advanced sales. Advanced sales, not early bird, but advanced sales are $3.99. That's what you can get it right now for on our website. If you haven't gotten it, get it now. It's going up at the end of June. Thanks.
And you do get access to the content afterwards if you buy it now. So they will be recorded because we are doing a remote session again, which affords us or gives us the ability to record everything. It makes it very easy to share it with you. So yes, definitely sign up if you haven't already. So yeah, Alpha Launch. Alpha Launch is a way for you to deploy mobile apps without the App Store or Google Play. Just as a quick recap about what is involved in publishing a mobile application, this is your typical publishing workflow. Once you've built your app and you're ready, built your app in Alpha Anywhere, and you're ready to take that next step to build it and put it up in the App Store, there's a whole bunch of things you need to do. You need to configure a Cordova build project for it that includes all sorts of things like what kind of plugins did you use and information about you as a developer and images and links and assets and all that stuff. So you have to configure that, and then you have to build your app using something, either Ionic App Flow or the Cordova CLI builder, CLI meaning command line interface, which for some people may be incredibly daunting to use because the command line interface can be scary to use. It's not very user-friendly interface. But Ionic App Flow does make that easy, but now you're paying for something. And if you are going to deploy an iOS application, you have to sign up for the Apple Developer Program. You have to purchase a developer seat or something, I forget what it's called, so that you can actually create the certificates that you have to include in your app so that it can be installed on the user's device. You have to create provisioning profiles. Then you have to build an App Store listing, which might be something you want to do. Keep that in mind, which, it's going to involve, videos of your app, photos of your app, descriptions of how it works, SEO optimization so people can find you. And then you need to upload your app into the App Store, which is a review process, which you can get rejected if you didn't dot every I and cross every T to their satisfaction. And they'll often tell you what you did wrong, but that whole process can take a while, and you have to do it every single time that you're going to publish an update to your app or release a new app. However, Alpha Launch gets around that, sort of. It lets you skip the App Store. So we provide a mobile application you can download and install. And then you publish your app to an application server and then register that server within Alpha Launch so that it knows where to go and install your apps into the Alpha Launch application. You can use this not only to deploy your apps, but you can also use it for testing, and it's incredibly quick to test apps in Alpha Launch. If you've got once you've figured out the flow of creating your Alpha Launch publishing profile and getting comfortable with that, it's far quicker to test than it is to go through other systems at times. And it doesn't require any extra accounts except an application server. You do need that, but we don't consider that an extra account. That's just something you need as an Alpha Anywhere developer. Now, there are some limitations with Alpha Launch. I mentioned before, building your App Store listing. If you use Alpha Launch, your app is not going to show up in the App Store. You will have to tell people how to get your app separately. So it's not going to be discoverable. If that's something you really need and really want, you need to go the other route of using Ionic App Flow or the Cordova CLI builder to build your own standalone app to put in the App Store. Other limitations also include that it is branded by Alpha Software because it's our app, and we are providing it to you for free. And you can only use the plugins that are included in Alpha Launch, which are available on the Settings tab. There's a button to tap to expose some advanced settings or more developer information. And one of those options that gets shown in settings is the plugins listing option. And you tap on that, you can scroll through that and see what plugins are available to you. If you need to use a plugin that isn't in Alpha Launch, then you'll need to go the route of building your own app. But if you don't want to do that, if you like the idea of Alpha Launch, we do offer custom Alpha Launch deployments, which would be branded for your brand. We'd put that in the App Store for you, and we'd include all the additional plugins that you need as part of that. So, and we do have a couple customers that have done this before and continue to do so. Just as a reminder, this is the Alpha Launch checklist of the recommended steps you should go through. Certainly the first time you do this, once you are comfortable with understanding what your server URL is, you can kind of skip a few of these things like creating an A5W page and publishing that page so that you can get the page URL so you can use that to figure out what your AJAX callback URL is so that the app, when it's running on the device, knows where the server is so that it can run server-side code that your application may need. But in addition to that, you also need to include an exit button. If you don't include the Alpha Launch exit button, no one can get back to the main screen in Alpha Launch, which means they can't access the other apps they're running. They can't update the app that you've deployed, and it makes it just a generally not a great experience when you're in Alpha Launch from a testing perspective, because if you forget it and you're just using it for testing, you have to like close the app out, shut it down manually, and relaunch it every single time to get back in there. Whereas the exit button just takes you back to that main screen and lets you go and install the update if you need to install an update for testing. So the two pieces on the checklist here are the application server and then your Alpha Launch apps themselves. On the server side, do make sure that you have set your same site cookies to unset. That is a server setting. If it is not set to unset, any AJAX callbacks made to your server to fetch data, post data, whatever needs to happen, they will fail because by default, same site cookies are set to strict. And when they are set to strict, the mobile app cannot communicate with the application server. It will be blocked. You'll get errors. Nothing will work. Make sure you do that. This is like the number one thing people do is they forget to set that. And then also when setting up your Alpha Launch app, do remember to also include any assets that are in addition to your UX component. So the core app for an Alpha Launch app is a UX component. If that component includes other components or uses files that are not embedded within it. So what I mean by that is if you are using images in an image folder in your UX, in your app, and they haven't been base64 encoded into the app, you need to make sure those are included with your additional assets. Things like the web theme, I believe, are automatically included. So that one will be included for you. And the download location here, just as a reminder, you can publish your apps files, which when they're installed, they're downloaded from somewhere. That location can be on an Amazon S3 bucket, or it can be on your application server. Both are fine locations. So today we're going to talk about a few things that I think are worth just sort of talking about a little bit more with Alpha Launch. So we have that webinar that we did last May on how to get set up and publish and run. So that's there for you. That information hasn't changed at all in the last year. So it's still relevant. So if you've never used Alpha Launch before and you want to get started, start with that webinar. Once you finish that webinar, now we're going to get into some stuff that is helpful in helping you figure out problems, common mistakes. These are the things people commonly get wrong, like the server URL is wrong, you typed it in wrong, or you assumed it was something and it wasn't that thing. This is why we encourage publishing an A5W page, because you can literally take that whole page URL on your server and just drop it right in the Alpha Launch configuration, and that's your server URL. Other things that I've seen people do, the second one didn't publish to the web root on the server. And what happened in this case is someone was running a standalone, I think it was a classic server, it might have been IIS. They published their Alpha Launch application into a subdirectory inside the web root, which messed up their server URL, so they didn't match. And your files, this is especially important for UX components, they have to go in the web root. You can't publish them in a subdirectory. Everything has to be right in the web root. So they put it somewhere else and it didn't work because the application couldn't find those files. So make sure if you're running Classic that these things are going into the web root. You can get failures if you forgot to configure your connection strings. So connection strings are your strings that describe how to access your database or how to access your third-party storage solution like Amazon S3. In the publishing profile that you use to publish your Alpha Launch application, that connection string needs to be the one that is used by your server. So the connection string needs to describe how your server connects to those resources. So if you forget to configure a connection string, either because you're using one and you're just using like a local SQL database, but when you publish, you need it to point to somewhere else, you need to make sure you've set those up right. Otherwise, the connection will fail, and you'll get those big red error message boxes about SQL connection couldn't be reached or couldn't be opened. It means that you forgot to configure your published connection strings. And then also, forgetting the exit app button can make your life miserable when working with Alpha Launch, as well as if you forget to set the same site cookie policy, it's not going to be able to make any callbacks. It's going to behave badly, and it's just not going to work. So you need to make sure that you've set that to unset on your server. So common mistakes. A common mistake lots of people make, and I'm sure everyone here is guilty of this, is actual like programming or implementation errors in your app. You set something up and it's causing a JavaScript error. And in Alpha Launch, when that happens, you get this really weird message, and it says A5 underbar URL underbar extra error, and then whatever the error message is. And looking at that, it's what? No, I don't know what that is. I don't know what A5 URL extra is. I don't know what alpha launch.error/index.html is. These are files that are not in my project, and I have no idea what's going on. So just to give you a little bit of information about this, when your application is loaded, sorry, hold on a sec. I do have a slide for this. When your Alpha Launch app is loaded, the UX component is loaded dynamically into Alpha Launch. And that thing that we saw on this previous page on the left side, this index.html, that is the page that was generated to run your app. So this is stuff in Alpha Launch that's trying to load your application, but it's running into a problem. You do not have access to index.html. You can't really get at that file. So how do you debug it? Well, you do know two things. You know that it's a JavaScript error if that message is popping up. And you know exactly which UX component is being loaded because that's been configured in your Alpha Launch Publish profile. So what you need to do is actually open that UX up either in live preview, if you've got a standalone app and it doesn't need things that can only be tested in a live test, open it up in live preview, open up the Chrome debugger, look at the errors that are showing up there. If you're not seeing errors there, save it on a page, that core UX component of your app, and then do a live test in the browser and open up the Chrome debugger and look at what's being generated. Because I'm pretty sure if you do either of these two things, you are going to be able to identify where that problem is occurring, or at least get a good guess about what's going on. And I actually have an example of this for you guys. So I have an app that I built. This is Alpha Anywhere, for those of you who are new here. And it's got a problem in it. And when I ran it, if we go back to those slides, this is literally the error messages that I saw from this UX component when I published it. It's the app is called app with error. And when I tap on it to launch it, I see this really weird uncaught syntax error, unexpected token, parenthesis, on line 536, which is no line in my app. But there's the uncaught syntax error, unexpected token. That's the thing we need to be looking for. So if we come back to this app and we run it in live preview, and we'll do a full preview, and I'll start the server and give it a moment. You notice here this is a totally white screen. There's no pop-up. There's no pop-up error, but it's a totally white screen, which is indicative of a JavaScript error. When you have JavaScript errors in your application, they can halt the loading of the app itself, and what you will end up with is either a blank page, a partially loaded page. You might see a bunch of little weird squares along the bottom where your buttons were supposed to be, and that is 100% the sign of JavaScript encountered an error and just stopped loading your app. So in in live preview, if your app is small or doesn't require running in live test, you can come down here and click the Chrome Debugger button. And this opens up the Chrome Debugger console. And if you come over here onto console, lo and behold, we have this unexpected token closing parenthesis. That is the same error that I saw in that pop-up in my app. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come over here, and you see here this is this file is A5W pages being referenced in :669. If you click on this, it will open up that code and take you right to that line where that error has occurred. And what I see here is enable equal open close paren. And I didn't write that code, but I did write that code. So you will have to do a little bit of investigation, just like inspect where this code is to try to figure out what has happened. But if we look up here, we see enable button underbar 1 on a dialog watch. This is a watch expression for an enable expression. And this line right here is failing. So I need to go look at the enable expression for my button to figure out why. So this usually indicates that your enable expression is wrong. Either it can't be parsed or you have a typo in it. Sometimes it might actually show you the expression, and on the surface it might look correct. But if it's failing there, it's definitely not. So if we go back here to design and we find our button 1, which is button greet here, we see button 1, and we come down to the enable expression. We open it up. It's got two things going on here. So if you've never worked with enable expressions, they are a weird blend between SQL syntax and JavaScript syntax, or XBasic, depending on if you're using a client-side or server-side expression. So the syntax rules are a little different. So here, the first problem we've got is we've got this double equal here. If we open up the syntax rules here, comparisons are just done with a single equal sign in this setup. So that's the first problem I need to fix. And I'll click OK, thinking I've fixed it, and we go back to live preview. I get a warning, and it says your UX component has one or more controls that have a client-side enable show hide expressions that references list controls that are not in this component, and that list is list 1. So this probably isn't going to work, or maybe we'll get a little bit further, but we need to go back and address that as well. So I got further, but it's still, I still have that error. If you open up the Chrome debugger, you will still see messages in here. We see cannot read property of is dirty. And so if we go back, we see that I have a list named contacts, not list 1. So this really needs to be contacts. Oops. All right. So if you don't know the syntax for this, you can use insert field to pick the right one. So let's quickly show how that would work. I'll delete that out. Insert field. Dialog list row contacts is dirty. Click OK. So now that's my button. It's disabled. It's not going to enable because it's a static list. But the point is now that if we look at the Chrome debugger, there are no errors in the console. So this is fixed. I can now publish it up to alpha launch and continue with my testing. Now, if you are unable to just run this in live preview, maybe you've got some additional scripts or something that have to run that aren't being loaded unless you're running in a live test. What you can do there is save a page using this button here, and we'll call it like test app or something like that, or we can call it even air app. I've got caps lock on here. Save it. Come over here to live test, and using the development server, pick your page that you created and just run a live test. And you have access to the same debugging tools in live test that you do in live preview, with the added benefit that when you run something in the browser, it actually has the full context of the browser and isn't being emulated. So here's that same component, and if I hit F12 here in, I think this is Edge, there's that error again, unexpected token, and you can click on this text. I don't think Edge does it, so I will drag this over to Firefox. It's going to depend on the browser, really, whether or not they'll give you access. And when I was doing this earlier today, I noticed that Edge wasn't giving me access to that information. So here we are in Firefox. I can click here. It takes me over to that A5W page. It's going to load it up. It's going to take me right to that line where we see enable. And if we go up, we see enable button. So there's my clue here too, that I need to go and check out my button one's enable expression. So those are your two options for debugging your client-side errors. If it gets into something that's involving like a plugin, PhoneGap plugin, not PhoneGap, sorry, Cordova plugin, it may be harder for you to do that because you cannot debug plugin code in a live preview or live test because it has to be running on a mobile application. So if you do run into those situations, you are always welcome to reach out to us at guys@alphasoftware.com. We can either, try to point you in the right direction or pair you with a mentor if you need to go further than that to get your apps running. But just know that these options are available to you. Next thing I want to talk about is versioning your apps. So every time you publish a changed Alpha Launch app, you must increment the version number. Otherwise, users cannot update to that new version of your app. If the version number hasn't increased, the Alpha Launch app doesn't know that it has changed. It doesn't matter if the file size on the back end has changed. It just doesn't know. So when you are doing something, so we fix our errors in our apps and we want to test an Alpha Launch. At that point, we would go over to Alpha Launch and we would want to open up the settings for that app and we would want to find the version setting and just increment that. How you increment this is up to you. Version defaults to a value of 1.0.0. I, for whatever reason, like to make it 0.0.1 and then 5, 6, 7, 8, however many times I do that until I've reached a point where I think it's ready to air quote ship, in which case I'll make it version 1 and then publish it. So make sure you are incrementing that version every time. If you don't increment your version, you have to uninstall the app and then reinstall the app to get that update into Alpha Launch. And then another thing that I want to talk about today is customizing your app listing. So if you've used the Alpha Launch app, we have a few sample apps, the Northwind app, the Amazon Lookalike app. Though I think the Amazon Lookalike app is not a great example of one that's been customized. But for sure, the Northwind one, it has a fancy background. The fonts are a little bit different. The font sizes are different. The app icon is a little more pronounced. And that was done by using the advanced mode option in the Alpha Launch configuration. So if we come over here to Alpha Anywhere again, there it is. Pardon me. We go to More, Alpha Launch, Publish Apps to Alpha Launch Server. This is where all the magic happens. We come in here to Error and we say Edit Component Settings. Down here in Template, there's a checkbox called Advanced Mode. This is not checked by default. By default, you're going to pick a background color, an icon type, and an icon, and these things are just inserted into a basic template that we have created for you. But if you want more control over that, you can turn on Advanced Mode, which gives you access to Advanced Template Definition, which is implemented with HTML. But you can do a lot with this, especially when you consider that images can be base64 encoded and embedded into your CSS or into an image tag, which if we look at this one, I configured app with error to have a really fancy background color with unreadable text on top of it. By adding this icon up here, this is a little note icon. It's in our Alpha Anywhere Icons library for SVG icons. I made it white, and then I inserted a background by URL encoding that. I used a website to do that. There are functions in Alpha Anywhere that will do that for you using XBasic through the interactive window. But if we go back here to Alpha Anywhere, I added that here, background image, URL, and then there's like 1,000 characters of base64 encoded data here. But that's the way to get a really cool image in there. You can also come down here. There are placeholders for name, DESC description. This is pulled out of the name and description fields in the Alpha Launch settings. And then app icon is this thing up here. Those are placeholders you can insert. If you accidentally delete one, you can grab them through insert placeholder. And then there's a preview button so you can see what you're doing. So you can come in here, you can change up the fonts if you want. Be aware that you are limited to the fonts that are on the device. You can't include a custom font here, or at least not that I know of, because we don't provide a way for you to include custom CSS to load those fonts. So you will have to stick with what's there, but you are free to use all sorts of HTML here to customize that look and feel. And in terms of picking an SVG icon, this is scary to look at, but you can select a built-in SVG icon from our library, and then I do believe if you extend these icons with some of your own, we'll have to investigate this a little bit, but you could possibly get them into this drop down or this picker. If not possible, you can always just paste it in here. So if you go to some site and find an icon you like, you can drop it in here. We do recommend that you keep your icons small, like restrict them to like 50 by 50 pixels. I believe in the Alpha Launch, if we come back here, uncheck this. I don't know if we have a recommendation here or not. I don't think we do. But you know, keep it 42 by 42 is what it's using. If you go through the icon picker here, you just keep it small. The bigger it is, the further down the page it's going to push things, or it could just like squish everything and look really bizarre on small form factors. So something to be aware of. And then it's not in the slides, but if you have questions about download type, please choose single with header. It just downloads everything as one package as opposed to 1,000 individual files. It'll speed up download significantly. And then again, if you have other assets like images that are not embedded directly into the UX, you would add them here. This includes other UX components loaded by your main UX. So now we're to the Ask Me Anything section, and I say about Alpha Launch, but you can also ask anything you want about Alpha Anywhere at this time. And before I let you read anything off, Dave,
Oh, I was so tempted.
Some people wrote in advance, and I wanted to.
If you write in early, you get.
If you write in early, yeah, you get your question answered to the best of my ability.
All right, well, then take it away.
Someone asked, is the server required? Yes, it is required because you have to have a publishing profile as part of the Alpha Launch publish process. So if you click here, literally, you have to pick a publishing profile. So you do need a server. And in the case of Community Edition, your only option is publishing to Alpha Cloud. So you would need an Alpha Cloud account at that point. Let's see here. I think I tried to answer everything else during my presentation.
All right.
I did want to point out we are making a few improvements to Alpha Launch. So one thing that you currently cannot do is you cannot host a web application while also hosting your Alpha Launch application on the same Alpha Cloud site. So we're working to add that support so everything can be published to one place. Whether you're going in on the web or you're running your app through Alpha Launch, it will just work. And that will be available soon. And there's also some tweaking going on in the security framework to improve our support for using the security framework in your Alpha Launch applications. This is actually something people have been writing in a lot. Everybody's trying to use it and they can't. It isn't working. it will work. We are improving this. It
It'll
will
work
definitely work
shortly.
in the next,
Exactly.
yeah, we're
Yep.
very, very close to getting that in, and I keep getting threatened by the dev team that they're going to put out a new release soon. Big grain of salt on that, but I mean, as soon as these things are in and a few other things, I believe we'll be putting out a new release.
Terrific. Other questions that were taken, or is that it for? Is that it for your list, Sarah? Can I
I think
continue
it's
with
it
the
for
other
my.
list?
You may continue with the other lists.
The other list. Excellent.
The
So
other
we'll start
list.
right here at the beginning. First of all, could you start with? I know this wasn't a whole beginner's guide to alpha launch. It's a little bit more advanced than that. But would you mind just quickly covering the pros and cons of alpha launch? It seems that, or how about if I summarize it, you can tell me if I left something out. It seems like alpha launch is really terrific if you're building an application, especially if you're building an application for your own company or for your own employees or something like that. You don't necessarily need to have it branded under your name in the App Store. And you also don't want to go through the hassle of putting it in the App Store. That means getting those developer certificates and all that stuff, and getting an Apple account in particular, and publishing it, have it get accepted or not, things like that. Since Alpha Launch is already there, it sort of acts as the shell, and your application can launch right through it. The disadvantage being that you don't get necessarily full control over all of the plugins. You may find a Cordova plugin that you want to use in particular is not included with that, in which case you can always contact us and we could look at doing a custom version for you. The list of the plugins that are available in, or can be seen inside the Alpha Launch application itself, which you could go ahead and download from the iOS App Store or from Android Play. How'd I do?
It's Google Play, but otherwise, yes.
Google Play. I did it. All right, thanks. Sounds like a 91. All right, cool. Thanks, Sarah.
Yes, you're welcome.
All right. So someone had a question of how do you deploy the plugins that come with Alpha Launch? Or how are they actually used, I guess is the question that the person is
So the
asking.
plugins in Alpha Launch, a lot of them are associated with, I did not want to open that, Action JavaScript. I'll close that. So let's go look at our error here because it's got a button. And we'll just go back here to JavaScript mode. So if you come into add new action and you filter this on PhoneGap, which is a holdover from when we had PhoneGap, now it's Cordova. Cordova and PhoneGap, same thing in this interface. If you see it, don't get confused. Just know that it's Cordova. So
let's say you want to scan a barcode or something like that.
Right, yeah. So all of these actions use a Cordova plugin to interact with the device in some way. So the example that Dave just brought up, scan barcode, this action will, when invoked, will open your camera, which you can then use to scan a barcode, a QR code, ISBN code on the back of a book, that kind of stuff. And then once it's scanned, we'll deliver the data that it read into a on success JavaScript function or a JavaScript. If it succeeded, if it failed, it will go into the error state, which is this one right here. And then once you get that information, you can do what you need to go look up data in a database, populate a field, whatever it is that you want to do. But this requires a plugin for it to work because it needs to communicate with the hardware, and that's done through PhoneGap plugins.
Terrific. Next question is there a lifespan of an alpha launch application?
I suppose that's on you. Are you maintaining it, or you just let it lapse and fall out of favor? I believe they will just keep working until at such time that we decide that you are running a server that's way too old. But I don't think so. There's no age on these things. Because when it loads your app, it downloads all the CSS required to run it from your server or from the installed files, actually.
There's certain like session timeouts and stuff still apply if you have an
Yeah,
application that
sessions
allows you
certainly
to
apply.
log
Yeah,
in for 15 minutes and then after that with no activity you get booted out. That still
yeah,
works.
that still works.
Yep. But there's no set expiration date when you publish
No,
your app to alpha launch.
no, and your apps will work offline in Alpha Launch. It's something I didn't mention, but it does support your app is on the device as if it was installed. So
Yeah, actually that's a huge deal. Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
like
Yeah,
it won't really need the server unless you're making a callback that requires it.
exactly. Um, Here's another question. You were talking about, hey, put things into the web root, right? So, but the
Mm-hmm.
question is, does everything have to be in the web roots? And so this is two offshoots. First of all, can you do a subfolder which has got like your images in it? Would that be okay?
Yeah,
Or is
that's fine.
yeah.
Yeah, when you
So
publish, so
it's UX components specifically are the ones we don't want in
yeah,
subdirectories.
so your web root when it gets published in terms of like a web application, like I took all these files and published them up to Alpha Cloud. My web
Yep.
root is going to be what you see here, with the exception of probably PhoneGap projects. I don't think we publish that folder. Doesn't make any sense to do that. There's a few other folders we don't publish that you don't see them here because they're hidden. That goes up. It's in the web root. All the UX components have to be in the web root. If you publish your app and you've put a UX component inside a subdirectory, this is not going to work. They all have to be in the web root. You can put other files like CSS files or images like that inside of folders within it, your JavaScript. That's fine. We do that with our themes here. So those all live inside of a CSS folder.
So now
But
here's
specifically,
another.
these components need to be in the web root.
Okay. So what if you were using, say, I don't know, like the classic server, but you wanted to host multiple applications on the same server? Can you have web different web routes off your web root, or does it just not work that way? They're just going to interfere with each other.
So if it's the classic server, what you can do is you can either publish to a subdirectory on your site. So your site's like www.example.com.
Mhm.
One way to have multiple apps served up through that is each app is a subdirectory. So it's slash app A, slash app B,
And so in that
www.example slash app
case,
C. But
slash
each one
slash
of
app
those is a
A,
web root for a
that's what
specific
I was going to
instance of the
ask,
classic
right?
server. Yeah.
So you can have two web roots is the thing.
You can, yeah, and we have info on that if anybody needs that. It's in the documentation.
Hmm.
There's two ways to approach, hosting multiple apps with the classic server on your server. You can, have a single domain with subdirectories, each one representing a web root and a separate instance of the application server running. Or you can have multiple IP addresses mapped to specific locations on your server. We have information on both. Uh, I could actually pull that up if that is of interest.
Right. Oh, I see. And the end
Uh,
update was, oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the articles you're going to look for are like running two server instances on the same machine using different ports. This is the one way you can have multiple apps running on the same server, running multiple instances of the application server, running multiple application websites using multiple application server configuration files. Just as a heads up, like running multiple websites with the classic server on one server it requires a lot of configuration and setup. If this is something you want to do, I strongly encourage you to use IIS instead. It's just so simple. It just works. The
Or
configuration
even
is
look at
far
Alpha Cloud,
simpler.
or look at
Or
Alpha
look at
Cloud for
Alpha
that,
Cloud. Yeah, if you
which
don't
makes
want
it
to.
easier still.
Yes, we are your host at that point. But IIS or Alpha Cloud, honestly, the setting up and running the classic server can be daunting at times, especially since I think on IIS side of things we've eliminated most of the manual installation pieces that you used to have to do. And it's all handled by the installer now.
There's another question just about Alpha launch licensing. It is included with your existing license, basically. So there's,
Yeah,
got an
Alpha
Alpha
Launch is
Cloud
free.
account, it's free.
It's
But
free.
of course you have to have a Alpha server to actually power your Alpha application. Nothing there has changed. It's just that we've made it a really convenient way to distribute your applications to other people using that. Another question here is, would it be good practice to use Alpha Launch for a menu system with one application? I can
What?
think of two different ways of interpreting that question. One is, if you're using Alpha Launch, is it fine if you just have one app? You know, for
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
you can have
And
just
the
one app.
yeah, and the other is, would it be okay to maybe divide your app up into multiple apps and have them launch separately in Alpha Launch? And I guess it would depend on your
Yeah,
application.
yeah, it's
But
up to you. That if we go back to this, if we
but
go
they
to
wouldn't
more,
talk to each other, right? Like those two apps would not be sharing the same file system stuff, or would they?
well, I mean, it's the file system is the device, so they all have to share the same file system, but the data for one app is isolated from the data of another app.
Right. And is Alpha Launch considered one app in that case, or is it the apps under Alpha Launch that are considered the individual apps?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I suspect that your data in your app is safe from other people.
It took 46 minutes before you didn't know an answer to a question. I'm pretty impressed this time, Sarah. So very
I've
good.
been faking it the whole time.
So yeah,
What?
but break it up does make sense. But can you get to one from the other? Write us, and we'll see, and we'll find out the answer to that one if you like.
No, we can ask. I'm pretty sure the answer is no, you cannot, but we can investigate.
Yeah. The next one is, does Alpha Cloud have the ability to have an IPsec tunnel to our network? That way the server can access local resources. I'm going to say I don't think so. I mean, your Alpha Cloud application could certainly go through a firewall to access applications if you've opened that up, and maybe you've even pinned that firewall to the specific external IP addresses that you get with Alpha Cloud. But I don't think it has any. We have any special tunneling capability built into
I'm
that.
not sure. That's a question for Alpha Cloud team.
Yeah, good to know.
Since you brought it up,
Yeah.
I did want to point something out that I forgot to mention, and this goes back to configuring your connection strings.
Hmm.
And I forget where it's at. Maybe it's here. If yes, it is here. So so if you come over, if you have an Alpha Cloud, if you have a database
Hmm.
running on a server, and you want to be able to use that database with your app, your Alpha Launch app that is published to Alpha Cloud. If you come down to your Alpha Cloud status, and you'll need to know what region it was that you published your app in, which is in the configuration of the application when you set it up. Your server that's hosting the database needs to allow these egress IPs access, otherwise Alpha Cloud can't connect to your database. So just make sure you are also including that. There's information in the documentation in the Alpha Cloud doc about egress IPs. I can pull that up and send a link to that. Actually, first let me give everybody a link to the classic server documentation. There you go. And then egress.
Terrific. So those are the IPs that need to be whitelisted in your
Yes,
firewall.
yeah, it needs to be whitelisted in your firewall, and there may be a few other things you need to do, but there's a few extra steps you need to do to make sure that Alpha Cloud can talk to your data. If it can't talk to your data, either because your connection string is wrong or you haven't given it access, your app's not going to work.
Excellent. Question, does login work the same in Alpha Launch? I believe you can use, although we were talking about the security system having some issues at the moment, but will be fixed
Yeah, it'll work
shortly.
the same.
It'll work the same for
Yep.
the application that you launch within Alpha Launch. Alpha Launch itself won't be password protected, but the app that you launch from Alpha Launch will be password
Yes.
protected if you have it set
Yeah.
up that. And another one, actually, a couple of people asking these questions. What is the purpose of base 64 encoding images? How is that beneficial to you? What can you do with those?
Well, if you base 64 encode them, you can embed them directly into your HTML markup. Whereas if you don't do that, then your image has to be hosted somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe I didn't really explain to this why I did that for this this component here. But in this advanced template definition, there's nowhere for me to say, upload an image and attach it.
Right. And if you
Right?
put in
So it's got
something
to be
like,
hosted somewhere. And if I don't have a place to host it, I can just encode it and embed it know that it makes your data a lot bigger. And the larger the data set is, at least in web applications, the longer it will take to download it. So, don't go crazy base64 embedding images all over the place in your apps, if you've got a lot of them.
But these are just for the
Yeah,
thumbnail templates.
just for the
Chances are they
thumbnail.
won't be
Yeah,
huge. And if you
yeah.
had used something like an image source equals my database slash the image, I'm not sure if it would work, but I wouldn't do it anyway, even if it did, because it wouldn't work offline. Because the whole thing is
Oh
embedded
no,
in there. There's no,
that's a really good point, actually. Yeah. I think once it gets the data from the web, it's fine. But I actually don't know if Alpha Launch tries to re-download that image
yeah.
when it's in an offline state. So in terms of this preview, having that all packaged in right there, I don't need to worry about hosting it somewhere, giving Alpha Launch access to it if I've, hidden it behind an S3 bucket, or it's just here.
Hmm. Excellent. The person who was asking before about access and tunneling points out that they're using a virtual private connection or a VPN, a virtual private network, to do all their stuff because they want to leave that open, which I absolutely appreciate. So if you do have those sorts of security concerns around cloud, I highly recommend getting in touch directly with the cloud team. Of course, you could reach us at guides@alphasoftware.com, but there's also cloud support at alphasoftware.com. Did I get that one right, Sarah? Cloud support.
Um, I think so.
Okay. That's pretty. I need backup here. I'm in charge of
Yeah,
this stuff.
email guys at alphasoftware.com will forward it there right away. I think it is cloud
Exactly. We'll
support at
we'll make sure. There's.
alphasoftware.com.
Let me take a look there. Yeah, excellent.
It might
Well,
even be
it
on all
looks
these
like
pages.
we are running low on questions, which is kind of good, I think. If you
Yeah,
do have further questions, though, go ahead and send them to guides, GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com. Sarah, thank you very much for your presentation today. Thanks for everyone who showed up and asked questions. We look forward to seeing you at our next Alpha demo and Q&A webcast. Until then, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.